The story begins with a memory from back when the main character was a hero. He was thinking about how humans wouldn't change their thinking even though he saved the world. He then heard his name coming from somewhere far away, then zoomed in again. His brother called him a failure and told him their father was calling for him. He said that the day had finally come and he should be thankful for their father's compassion. They entered their father's room, and without waiting, his father stated that as of this moment he was banished from the house of Duke Vastfeld. He was kneeling so they didn't see his smile. He was a hero a long time ago, but now he is the son of such a mansion. So he decided to become a failure by choice to have an easy life. Now that he was free from any responsibility, he thought about what to do from now on. He was a reincarnator, and in his previous life he was a hero. However, even though he became a hero, he was pursued by assassins and had to spend his entire life living on the edge. Not only that, even though he saved the world, the only thing he gained was the dreadful gazes of the people he saved. It was reasonable because his power was not something humans could comprehend, as it was bestowed upon him by the goddess. Tired of living among those people, he decided to leave that world and wanted to start his life over from scratch. And yet, it wasn't even close to what he would call peaceful. He was reborn into a royal family, and before he knew it, he was highly praised as a prodigy. When his stats were appraised at the age of 5, he was already at level 1 and had 5 points in all of his statuses. People with 5 points in even one of their stats on the coming of age were considered geniuses, and they get the treatment of a prodigy. However, that was the story until he became 10 years old. Since then, his level hadn't gone up and his little brother reached level 2 before him. Because of that, he wasn't treated as a prodigy anymore. He was treated as a failure by his father and despised by his little brother. The blessing ceremony, where one receives a gift once they become an adult, can even overturn the status gap. God's gift was suitable for anyone, no matter who they were. In the ceremony where people receive the blessing, he faces an unprecedented event. He received no gift from God. Thus he became worthless and was finally banished from the house. He was indeed a complete failure in this world, but at least he was completely free and could move to some remote region. While thinking about that, he heard a roar coming from somewhere and used his Eye of Heaven skill to see what was happening. A woman named Beatrice was fighting with a monster. He wondered what she was doing in a place like that. He was going to need to procure lunch, so he didn't want to help her, but he knew he couldn't just ignore it. Meanwhile, Beatrice was barely keeping the monster away from herself. No matter how many times she cut it, it kept regenerating. It could be a golem, but she had never heard of one in the shape of a beast. Even if she keeps using the same attack, the results won't change. Her heart was beating like crazy, but she didn't want to lose in a place like that, so she kept cutting it. She was looking for Liz and finally saw her praying with her eyes closed. The monster spilled something from its mouth and aimed at Beatrice. The mithril shield given to her by the king was melting and she was one step closer to death. Liz's eyes were still closed. Beatrice was trying to say that she wanted her to stay alive even if it was by herself. The sword clashes had stopped, meaning the monster was already taking down Beatrice and coming for her. That monster was not an opponent she could defeat, but she was still thinking about what Beatrice said to her. She then recalled the memory of Alan stating that it was weird for them to engage at that age, but he was still thinking that she was more than what he deserved. She couldn't figure out why she was thinking about him all of a sudden. Then she heard Alan's voice saying why she was remembering him even though he was right in front of her eyes. He was holding the monster with one hand and looking at her like it was the most normal thing in the world. She shuddered a lot, wondering why he was there, and he said that they should talk about the details later. Meanwhile, Beatrice was barely living but was still trying to find a way to buy some time for Liz, but she was heavily injured. Alan ran beside her, and just as he thought, it had a core. He had a plan even though he didn't want to use it. He used the power that he obtained from his previous life. Sword's authority, world end. He used it right into the core and the monster exploded immediately. He then turned to Beatrice and told her that she didn't use the honorific thing. Firstly, her wounds needed to be healed. Beatrice wondered how he was going to heal the wound as it was so heavy. He told her to not worry and used his healing light magic. The wound healed in a few seconds, and not only that, her clothes were back to their original state. She wondered how he got that much power, but it wasn't a big deal for Alan. Liz praised Alan for having a power that can heal wounds, as is usually impossible. He changed the topic and mentioned that he got kicked out of the Duke's house. They were both shocked by this news. Beatrice couldn't believe that this was possible and wondered what they were thinking by this action. Liz, his former fiancée, asked if there was anything she could do for him. He was relieved that they hadn't changed and said that she was no longer his fiancée, so no need to worry. Beatrice asked what he was planning from here on, but apparently he hadn't decided yet. Hearing that, Beatrice asked if he could be Liz's escort. This made him remember the moment Liz defended Alan. She was crying and saying that he wasn't a failure and was a splendid person. He then stated that if Liz was fine with him, he was happy to do it. 1 week later, we see that they are in a village in a remote region and are faced with a person named Akira Kazaragi. He introduced himself as the hero of this generation and apologized beforehand if he would go overboard. It seemed like they were about to have a duel. In the next scene, Alan was finished telling the story of his ban from his own home. Beatrice asked about his gift because the power he used to heal his wound was impossible. Even with the use of potions, it shouldn't be possible to heal wounds to that extent. Before he could answer, Liz assumed that his gift was rank 6. The Archbishop's gift was ranked 5, and almost nobody had a gift ranked higher than that. Currently, gifts above rank 5 cannot be recognized, so that was the reason why he couldn't discern the gift that Alan held. It did make sense to Beatrice. Meanwhile, Alan was debating if they were sharp or just airheaded. He then asked if they were both fine with this. They both knew how useful his power was, so he wondered if they were fine with traveling with a person like him. Beatrice said that for the sake of the country, she should bring him back to that house, but Riz refused it with a firm tone. She stated that she was going to prioritize her friends more than the country, although she might be disqualified as a royal family for this. Even then, she thinks it was wrong to build a country by sacrificing someone. Alan didn't expect this from her. Beatrice agreed, saying that since the Lord was acting like this, she too prioritized her friends. Alan thanked them with a big smile on his face. He then warned Beatrice to stop being so formal and use his name if they were friends now. Beatrice blushed, saying that that was the reason she dropped both honorifics and polite language. She had always been speaking this way, so it was hard to change it all of a sudden. Liz wanted Beatrice to call her by her name too, but she was strict about her. The man who was driving the carriage informed them that they were going to arrive at the village soon. They looked outside of the carriage and saw the village near the border. They thanked the man for giving them a ride, and the man left. Since Liz and Beatrice joined Alan, it took 10 days to arrive. There was a village near the border far away from Knox, the center of Vestfeld household. But the village was so quiet that they questioned if there was anyone living there. Rather than a village, it seemed like a settlement, and there was no sign of people. While they were talking, they heard someone yelling "Go home" to someone. They followed the voice, and a bunch of people were surrounding a girl who was kicked out of a building. She came out of the house that looked like a village chef's. She stood up and cleaned the dust in her clothes while asking if she failed. She then looked at the people around her and noticed that the number of them increased. Then, noticed Liz. Alan asked Liz if she knew her. She asked if he knew the gift, Braver. In every era, one person receives a special gift, the strongest gift akin to the war power of the great warrior. The person who holds that power is called Hero. Liz stated that she came to this village after receiving the revelation. She finally understood what to become the mark of light and drive away the darkness meant. Alan was confused, so he asked her to explain it further to them. She then introduced the girl as Akira Kazaragi, the hero of this era. Alan now understood it. He asked Akira if he could call her by her name, and she approved. She then asked who he was, and he introduced himself. They all introduced themselves, and Alice then asked what they needed from her. Alan asked about the commotion, as it would be easy to hear it directly from her. Akira asked if he could help her if she told him. He didn't promise anything, but he still wanted to hear it from her, as it seemed like the villagers wouldn't tell them anything. Akira found them weird, as they were willing to listen to some stranger's story just because the revelation told them to. But she liked them. She agreed to talk, but in exchange she had one condition. She noticed that Alan wasn't a normal person and wanted to have a quick match with him. He accepted her offer with a bored face, but then warned her to watch her step before being too confident. She didn't care what he was saying and attacked him, but found herself in the sky as he threw her. He reminded her what he said 30 seconds ago. Liz and Beatrice were shocked once again. Braver was one of the hereditary gifts. Among the 5 that presently exist, it was supposedly the most balanced type. It is said that Alice was one step behind the strongest knight commander in the kingdom, and that was 2 years ago. And Alan overpowered her so easily, which made her think about what his family was thinking by kicking Alan out of the house. After 9th time being dodged by Alan, Akira still wanted to keep going. Even though she had been kicked out many times, Alan had almost no damage. Alice wanted to know how he could be this powerful and attacked him once again. And the 10th time, she was once again defeated. She then told Liz and Beatrice to get away from there, as it was going to be dangerous. Beatrice figured out what Akira was planning to use, and she knew even Alan wouldn't be able to survive. Akira used her Thunder Emperor rate to strike Alan. A huge and powerful strike happened in the area, but even with that, Alan was uninjured. She fell to the ground and gave up as there was no power left in her. Alan stated that even he would get hurt if he got hit by that directly, but that was an obvious lie for Akira because he normally wouldn't even be able to evade that attack. He explained that he only used a little cheat, but that proved that she was strong. When he asked if he passed her condition, she laughed, saying that she would have to resign from being a hero if she said he didn't. She agreed to tell him everything, and they shook hands. First things first, he asked if there was a strong monster around here. Akira stated that she was kicked out by the chief when she asked for more details, and what she knew was apparently that the thing had been there for quite some time. Alan asked if that thing suddenly became violent or did someone had invaded its territory, but that was unlikely because that thing lives on that mountain. With this information, Alan realized that the monster was a dragon. Beatrice and Liz were also taken aback by this news. Alan didn't even fight with a dragon in his previous life and stated that if it was a dragon, it was different from other monsters, and it was an existence that could be negotiated with. So it was something like for the dragon to defend against the monster's attacks and was used to offer up sacrifices. Beatrice added that the homes nearby don't have any defense against monsters. Liz suggested to try and see if they could find and talk to someone in this village. Unfortunately, when they separated into two groups and tried to talk to the villagers, they all refused to talk and said that they didn't know anything. Alan's intuition was right. He then asked Akira how she knew about the dragon. She explained that before she came to this village, she picked up a kid. It was a slightly dirty kid and it seemed like she was offered as a sacrifice, but she escaped. Afterwards, Akira had been trying to get more details from the ones in the village, but the result was the same. Liz assumed that the dragon was threatening the people, but Alan didn't think so. He wondered if it was humans that encouraged this. When Akira asked what he was trying to say, he asked if it was possible that this village's purpose of being built was to be sacrificed. Liz was confused because who would benefit from that? He said that it was because that family was pursuing power. There was a possibility that they had been continuously asking for things like scales and blood that could only be obtained from dragons, and after that, they strengthened their power. If it was that specific family, it was possible. Liz seemed to understand which family he was talking to, but it was just a theory. Alan asked where was the abandoned kid now. She said that she was in a cave at the foot of the mountain because she couldn't let her come back to the village. Beatrice noticed that she already made her decision, and she was right. Akira stated that she asked her for help and she was going to defeat the dragon. Alan decided that they would go and do this in high spirits. Akira wondered if it was all right, but he said that a reason like helping people was already enough. Now, it was time to go and defeat the dragon. He turned to the girls and asked if they were sure about coming, as it would be better to stay here, but they seemed sure about going. It was true that Liz had never received such a revelation, but she was going to go because she wanted to, and she promised to not be a burden to them. Alan accepted her on only one condition, which was not to do things rashly. He warned her that if he thinks the situation becomes unmanageable, he would force her to retreat. She agreed him while Beatrice and Akira were watching them. Akira always thought Alan was someone more forceful. Beatrice said that she was right at a basic level, but Alan was quite lenient considering that. They started to whisper and gossip about him, so he stopped them and said that it was time to go. Now it was time to do a strategy meeting. The plan was for Alan and others would go from the backside and Akira to go to the top from the front using the paved road. Liz was surprised that Akira was going from the front alone. Akira asked if she thought she couldn't eat that dragon. Alan wondered if it was better for him to go alone if it was a sneak attack, but it was still dangerous to go alone. But Akira already decided and stated that if she left everything to Alan, he could settle everything on his own. She was braver, so she warned Alan to not take away all the cool scenes. Now that they planned everything out, they started their journey. When they were walking towards the mountain, they encountered a bunch of little dragons and thought that it was a pre-dragon battle. When they were about to take off their swords and start fighting, they heard the dragon's voice. They looked behind them and there it was, the dragon. He asked how dare they could be in his lair and busted his flame to them. That wasn't something they weren't expected to happen, but it was still too fast. The dragon seemed pretty angry that they came to his place and thought he wouldn't notice. He was very strong, but Akira didn't have any plan about escaping because she made a promise to that kid. She was dedicated to taking the dragon down from the sky and started to use her Emperor of Thunder magic. But before she could use it on the dragon, he said that the kid would be in the area of her spell and would be affected by her. Akira saw her unconscious body lying on the floor and she asked why he didn't kill her. He didn't seem to have a particular reason for that and just wanted her to be his toy. The crying face of the kid appeared in her eyes, asking for help. Akira's eyes got darker and she stated she was going to kill him. The dragon felt the fire in her voice. While she was trying to use her magic, he noticed that her form was bad. A long time ago, she was told that her skill was overly powerful and didn't fit a hero, so she shouldn't use it. The reason why she was using that power now wasn't because of the kid. It was because she wanted Akira to save her. But that alone was a good reason to use the Black Blade of Destruction to kill the dragon. But even though she stabbed him with that, it wasn't enough to defeat him. The dragon asked if she understood that she was facing him in a battle right now. And this wasn't a game, so he told her to take things seriously. Of course, she wanted to kill him while she knew that there was going to be a difference in power. But for the difference to be like this was not something she expected. She needed to let Alan know how dangerous this was. The dragon could kill the kid from the very beginning by using his power, so she wondered why he let her escape that time. That question made him laugh. and he stated that he was the one who allowed her to escape. For them to live on for eternity, there was nothing more bothersome than boredom. He just wondered what would happen if he allowed a sacrifice to escape, and that produced great results for him. The dragon also mentioned that the phrase braver was just something new that had appeared 1,000 years ago. And pity her. Akira had enough and took off a big sword and wondered if his body could take this. It seemed like the dragon was now taking her a little bit more seriously now. Akira stated that if he wanted to beg for forgiveness, he could do it now, but even if he did, she wouldn't forgive him. She opened her Demon Bane's Azure Lightning and made her final strike. But unfortunately, the dragon was still undamaged and made fun of her before hitting her really badly. Akira was on the ground and couldn't even move her body or make any sound. She was sure this was her end before the dragon was about to make the last hit. Alan's voice was heard. He dodged the dragon easily and stated that he had spoken extremely highly of himself. With the great blade of demon slaying, the dragon was heavily damaged. He couldn't believe Alan could wound his body. Liz was using her sight to examine the dragon. With her sight, she was able to see that the dragon's level was 52, a forbidden level held by the strong in this world. While the difference in level shows only despairs, the world end can easily remove this obstacle. Alan had no experience fighting against a dragon and felt a bit uneasy having to slay one. But thanks to Akira, he had been able to collect the dragon's information. She put her life on the line to give him the time to observe that dragon. For Akira's sake, Alan cannot lose against that dragon. The dragon was ready to continue fighting and told him to come if he was not afraid to involve them in this. When he was about to answer him, Beatrice and Liz called him and looked at him with reliable faces. Ever since Alan had been called a failure, he had never seen someone looking at him like that. That was also different from how people viewed him before his reincarnation. This gave him the strength to attack the dragon in the front, and the dragon burst his flame at them, intending to kill them all at once. However, with Alan's limit break flash power, he was defeated in one move. Alan was happy but was too tired to do anything. He falls to the ground to catch his breath. When he woke up, Liz was looking at him asking if he was okay. Before answering that, Alan worried about the kid, but Liz said that she was safe. Akira and the kid were there and they looked healthy. Akira's wounds were completely healed. She didn't seem to understand how that happened but was still grateful for whoever did it. Alan then asked what she was going to do in the future. She said that she was going to travel with the child for a while because there was no place for her to stay in the village. When she asked about him, he said that he was going to continue to escort Liz for a while as she asked him. Akira teased him for being an escort with a broken sword. He said that he was going to make a new sword too, and hoped that Akira and he could meet each other soon. They shook hands and Akira thanked him for taking care of her. She felt like a failure in being a hero, so Alan said that the reason that he could defeat the dragon was because she was fighting at first. So Akira was the only hero for this child. Liz asked if she was going to go back to the village with the child, and Beatrice wasn't sure if it was okay to leave them here. Akira didn't know what would happen if she told them she defeated the dragon, but she had the obligation to report what happened. Liz told her to tell the villagers that it was not bad and she could probably continue living as before. With that, Akira headed to the village with the kid, and the three of them headed to the next place. While they were walking, Liz confessed to Alan that she was the one who healed them, because she was a saint. Alan didn't say anything and just smiled at her. Beatrice said that if they find a carriage in this area, it would be great because the next place they were heading was quite far from there. Alan then wondered if he should do the other thing about the sword they were preparing for him. Liz approved that he should do it as it was the gratitude for the safe completion of this task, and being defenseless was dangerous. Liz said that there was a friend of hers who could make a sword that Alan would be satisfied. Alan was looking forward to it. At night they were in the carriage and Liz was sleeping on Alan's leg when Beatrice suddenly apologized. He didn't understand why she was apologizing all of a sudden, so she said that Alan was exhausted too, and the Princess Liz was sleeping. He was taking care of them, but she wanted him to sleep a bit now. Alan tried to comfort her by saying that he was young, so he wasn't exhausted at all. He sure was younger than Beatrice and Liz, and plus, Beatrice and Liz were more tired than him. But Beatrice was talking about his gift. He used his gift to clean their clothes and prepare a bath. She then wondered if there was any side effect from using that power and found his power very random. Liz woke up before he could answer and they apologized for waking her up. She seemed surprised that Alan was there and then realized that she was lying on his knees. Her face got red and she started to apologize while panicking. Alan said that she wasn't heavy at all, so it was okay. Beatrice agreed with him, but she still thought that Alan was tired and he should sleep a little bit. He started to laugh when she said something funny. They looked at him with a curious face. He explained that he laughed because he remembered that the master and her subordinate were really similar. Alan looked at the sky and the stars while thinking about how within those 10 days of being free from his house, it was really fun and enjoyable for him. They arrived at the village, but Alan seemed quite surprised as it looked like a city rather than a village. Liz approved him by saying that there was even a guild in there. But he wondered how this city was so developed in such a wilderness. The city was too well designed for ordinary people like locals. Before he started to overthink, Liz wanted to start by fulfilling her promise of a new sword. Beatrice wasn't surprised that he was interested in this place because the place was already being called special. He asked if she was saying the place belonged to the royal family, but that was a secret. She explained that there were different races in this world like elves, beasts, and humans, and most of them lived in the kingdom of Adster. Blacksmiths and mages could work for the royal family or maybe even live among people. But some find it difficult to live there and leave those lands. Alan once again realized that so-called discrimination existed everywhere because it was an unconscious thing. Beatrice continued saying that it was possible to be a handyman and independent of everyone, such as adventurers. While they were talking, they stopped at the front door of a house and Liz stated that it was their forge. When they entered the forge, Alan noticed that various works were posted everywhere. Swords were lined up, some of which would be better than his, yet strangely enough, she hung them up. Liz noticed that the rumble was gone and assumed she must have noticed that they had come, or it was just a coincidence. Beatrice chose the second possibility. Liz still thought she noticed them while Alan was still examining the place. Suddenly, they heard a girl asking what they were talking about. It was a blonde girl, and she stated that she was in the workshop. Liz stated how she hadn't changed at all, and she could say the same thing for Liz too. She wanted to know who Alan was. Liz apologized to Alan for not introducing her and he wondered if the girl was her girlfriend. This made her embarrassed a little, but he was asking because she used to tell him that the first princess could not make friends. He was glad that those problems were solved. Liz didn't expect him to remember that too, but as he said, that was the reason why he became his partner, as he initially wanted to support her in everything, and stated that he was feeling the same even now. Liz's face turned completely red after his thoughtful words and she could barely thank him. Liz eventually introduced them to each other. The girl was Smith Noel. She asked what kind of business they have and Liz asked if they could have a sword for Alan. But the moment she finished her question, Noel refused it. They couldn't understand why she was refusing them. She explained that she was very busy at the moment and had no time to fulfill other orders, and if they were going to buy a sword, they could sew it from other blacksmiths. But Liz wanted her to do it because she was the best blacksmith she knew. But she didn't seem to be accepting them and added that Alan already had a sword. Alan explained that his sword was nothing but a rubble, which made her even more sure that she wouldn't make him a new sword. She said that she didn't know what he was doing with that sword, but she wouldn't forget a man who treats his swords poorly. She then seemed to realize something and wanted to take a look at his sword. After a few seconds of confused looks, she changed her mind and agreed to forge a sword for him. But before that, she wanted to ask him something. She asked if he would like to possess a sword that surpasses the sacred in its power. Meanwhile, at Alan's family mansion, his brother was informing his father that the army was redundant, and he took care of everything himself. He wanted his father to leave all work to him, and he would do his best to make him forget about the title of worthless son. In the forge, Noel explained that the sacred sword would cost more than 100 swords. When Noel worked hard in the royal capital, she was considered one of the best in her field, not only in terms of craftsmanship but also in terms of speed. And when it became known that she was moving there, the royal family gave their all to not let go. Beatrice stated that she was jealous of him as a blacksmith like her wanted to make a sword for him. Alan said that when he looked at the swords in the forge, everything became clear to him. They were much better than the swords he made for himself, and all the swords in the workshop were high quality and not inferior to others. Moreover, Beatrice had given her permission for this work, so he had no reason to refuse. Liz seemed satisfied with the result as they both looked very happy. Noel told Alan to come back in 10 days and the sword would be done. Liz was so surprised and asked if she really planning to do it from scratch. She seemed fine with it as she got used to working too much a long time ago. And on top of that, she now had a reason to forge this sword. They left the shop after promising to come back in 10 days. Noel recalled a memory of her watching her master forging a sword. She was always done with a sad face, but even so, she seemed like she was enjoying it. Alan and the girls were walking and he asked what they were going to do now. Liz said that she had never seen Noel in such an enthusiastic mood, so she suggested to not bother her until she was finished with her work. Beatrice agreed and offered to wait somewhere quietly. She wanted to confirm that he really wanted that sword, and Alan confirmed her. He then remembered that they had some business in the town, so he told them to not pay attention to him and to do their business. Beatrice didn't find it fair for them to keep silent and decided to tell the truth. She said that her general passed away about 3 months ago. The general's skill was one of the strongest in the kingdom. It was a gift capable of raising the combat strength of each fighter under his command, and it wouldn't be a lie to say that a general was half the military strength of the kingdom. Whatever the case, the two of them couldn't do anything, and they also couldn't get Alan involved in this. Now that the kingdom lost its military general, it was possible that allied countries may invade these lands. The House of the Westfields, located on the southern edge of the country, was an ally of this kingdom. However, they wouldn't be able to come to the rescue because they were having problems with demons. Alan knew that if they let everything go, it would be done for the country. However, now that he had the right to refuse to help and enjoy quiet days, he wouldn't have to put up with the evil looks he had in the past. But on the other hand, he didn't want Beatrice and Liz to lose the place where they were born. He made his decision and said that he didn't know whether he would be useful, but if she was fine with his help, she could count on him. They seemed relieved by his words and thanked him sincerely. Alan then wondered what exactly happened to the general. Apparently it happened in the morning 3 months ago. The general usually woke up pretty early, but that morning he didn't wake up. His wife got worried and went to his room to check on him and found his body there lying without a head. They were unable to find out the identity of the criminal or his motives. Alan asked Liz if she noticed something unusual like magic or ability at the crime scene, but there were no traces of abilities other than those used by the guards. It seemed possible that demons were involved in this incident, but they had never heard of demons using some special technique to kill. There was information that they had a power similar to a gift like General had, but demons prefer to fight the enemy face to face. They called them demons for convenience because their essence was still a mystery to them. That was also because with almost no demon alive, so this story was shrouded in mystery. Alan concluded that there was a possibility that someone was in collusion with demons, but they actually had no idea who to suspect because they couldn't control everyone who entered the border. For Alan, this place was a great place to gather information as there were so many racial groups in the city. However, it would be suspicious to ask everyone that. After all, he came from the Westfield family. Beatrice informed him that they suspected and even conducted the interrogation and were investigating at a public level. As he already knew, the Westfield house was closest to the borders of demons, but they removed their suspicions. Even so, Alan didn't expect them to be a suspect. He then wondered why Liz was with her. She said that she had some suspicions. Right after the accident, she went to look for a criminal suspect. He asked her to tell him what she thought about all of this, but she wanted to tell him about it a little later. He didn't want to start this conversation again himself, but he just thought there may be people involved in the incident. The girls were grateful that they could conclude this thanks to Alan and were glad that he was there. In the next scene, they were at the hotel they were going to stay, and it was so luxurious that Alan couldn't believe a city like that had such gorgeous lodging. It was a hotel suite with several rooms, and Beatrice was surprised that there was such an extravagant room there. Alan wouldn't even think he could make that kind of money to afford this place. A couple of hours earlier in the Rivera Guild branch, something happened. Secretary of the guild Nadia Bentix greeted them, and they started to sell some materials. Alan didn't seem sure about the selling, but Beatrice said that she would pay him the commission fee instead of him. She wanted him to accept this as their thanks. He gave the material and Nadia took it to assess the data. She had a divine gift that evaluates the value of the materials. After a minute, Nadia asked where he got this material with a shocked face. She couldn't believe she was holding dragon scales, and also the ID card belonged to the Silver Maiden. Beatrice seemed annoyed to hear that name and explained that she must have been nicknamed that because of the armor she wore when she worked as an adventurer. Liz knew that she was working as an adventurer on her weekends, but that was the first time she heard that nickname. Beatrice explained that even during her weekend she always wore silver armor and a sword, so she never forgot that she was serving Liz. Alan was amazed how she never forgot about Liz even on weekends, which she heard a lot. In any case, Beatrice was very strong, so everyone already knew her. Nadia came and apologized for making them wait, but apparently she couldn't evaluate such a rare item like the dragon scale, so she needed some advice. She then immediately went inside to give the dragon scale to her director. An old man appeared not so long later, saying that they usually don't care about adventure stories, but when they heard about the dragon scales, they could not stay away. He kindly asked to know more about how they got it. He then realized that it was an impertinent question, so he apologized. He explained himself by saying that he heard shouting from the secretary, and he couldn't get past it. The girl next to him was also interested in him, as he said. Alan seemed suspicious, so he asked if they came from the south. They seemed to acknowledge that they didn't look like adventurers and stated that their dragon scale story was great in an exciting manner. He then asked Alan if he personally got those scales or if he and his companions did it together, and also wondered if one of them was a hero. After a few seconds of silence, Alan smiled and praised the man. The man also seemed happy and said that they were worthy of the biggest accolades and that he had so many things to talk about. But he suddenly excused himself and left there. They seemed pretty confused but didn't say anything. Meanwhile, Noel was giving her blood, sweat, and tears to make the sword. Even though she seemed like she was about to pass out soon, she still continued to work on the sword that would surpass the power of the sacred sword. At the hotel, Beatrice and Liz greeted Alan, who just came back from gathering information. He apologized for being late and informed them that there was no information in the guild about the incident with the general, and he hadn't done much searching today. However, there was a rumor about someone in the southern forest. Liz heard about that rumor too. Apparently there was something dangerous in the forest and there were a lot of townspeople who never came back from there. Beatrice asked if there was no trace found in there. She said that she sensed the presence of some powerful force, but she couldn't describe it in words. It seemed to Alan that someone was trying to confuse them in this way. 10 days passed, and they came to Noel's shop to see the sword and found her lying on the ground motionless. While he was freaking out, the girl seemed pretty calm. Liz suspected that in 10 days something like that would happen, but no matter how many times she told her, she still did it her way. She decided to scold her when she woke up and started to heal her. Beatrice was surprised that Alan didn't say something about it. He said that there were some other things he was interested in, which was his new sword. They went outside to try it out and Noel asked if he liked the swords. He said that it fit well in his hand, but that was all he kept saying since he grabbed them. Every sword was good for him. Noel forged 3 for him so he could pick the best one. Before that, Alan asked her how she was, and reminded her that if she fainted again like that, Liz would be very angry with her. She said that she was fine and just wanted his opinion on the swords. It seemed that she wanted to add something too, but then changed her mind and said that he couldn't be able to figure out which sword was better until he had fought a stranger opponent. He promised to see who could fight since she was only interested in his opinion. In the next scene, Alan defeats a lot of monsters but doesn't know if he should stop. Noel pointed out that he didn't say anything to her even though he invited her to the depths of this forest. He reminded her that he was the one who said he was heading to the place where he could find a suitable monster. He asked her if she had any other intentions. Noel just wondered why he was so carefree and didn't even doubt her. He explained that it was because he don't have any bad intentions for Noel and he thought that this had a connection. He was talking about a beast who seemed wounded. Noel asked what was this, and he said that it was the thing that caused harm to the forest and eventually attacked the city. Noel wanted to try her swords at least once. Alan didn't think he had any chance of winning against her at this rate. As far as he could tell, this monster nullified attacks below a certain level. He knew there was one nearby here, but he had never seen it personally. Moreover, this would be the best way to test its effectiveness. When he first saw the sword, he confessed that it was underwhelming, but depending on how he trained, he could kill a beast like this with one attack, as he said. He told her that when she was fixing it a bit, and then she would understand what he meant by that. He asked if she was trusting him, and she seemed sure. While they were in front of the monster and accidentally broke the barrier in front of it, the girl who came with the old, curious man at the shop was there watching them and wondered why was it broken. Alan and Noel left there while she was thinking about how she was told that Alan was an insignificant person and that she shouldn't be concerned about his existence, but she was still not sure if she should report this, then decided that it didn't matter. In the next scene, Noel was making a new sword, recalling the hard times she had while making the sword, and remembered something about her sad past. She knew that she had to test her sword before she handed it to Alan, and got ready to attack the monster. But before she could make the first attack, the monster woke up and immediately attacked her. She couldn't dodge the attack and got hurt really badly. Her body wasn't moving at all, but it was fine as Alan's sword was in the workshop. She was sure that Alan could beat this thing, but she was still disappointed that this guy was so strong. When she was about to reach for the sword, the old weird man grabbed it and complimented the sword. He asked if she crafted. He said that she could be able to hurt Fenlin the monster with it, but what happened was simply too bad. Noel was shocked. The man was surprised that she could still talk. He said that he wasn't expecting her to approach him first, which confused her. Noel didn't understand what he meant by that. He asked if she thought he would bother to prepare something like this to attack the city, and his purpose was her from the beginning. Noel was astonished and asked if he was the reason why that guy came 3 years ago, but he seemed surprised. He confessed that he made it move 3 years ago, but his goal then was the dwarf, because if he let it be, it would have become a great threat. She asked if he was there when it happened, and he didn't deny it. He said that when he looked closely at how the sword was made, he felt that he had seen this somewhere. He asked if she was a disciple of that dwarf of something. He joked about how both the master and the disciple would be killed by this beast, and wanted to take the sword as it was a stunning one. He then wondered if she could become his and promised to not mistreat her. And also he said that he already had someone quite similar to her. Noel didn't seem good but was able to tell that she didn't need it. The man then stated that he would pray from that hell that she suffered and die. He ordered Fenrir, the monster, to kill her. The monster was about to beat her when Alan came and cut it with his sword. He was carrying the sword she made. Since she wasn't in her home when he visited it, he got worried and went to the forest to check, and it seemed like his premonition was right. The man interrupted and stated his surprise. He asked if that was something related to his gift. But even with the power he had, he didn't think he could defeat Fenrir, which means he can't win against him. He asked him to be his too and promised to go off the girl in exchange. But Alan could comfortably say that there was no reason for him to accept such a proposal. He then used his sword authority to split the monster in two. The man's eyes were shocked. Alan said that the sword had a nice feel to it and was better than he expected, like he didn't just kill a whole monster in one move. The men couldn't believe this was possible and ran away like a coward immediately. It was a wise decision for him as he knew he couldn't win. But Noel wanted Alan to tail him because he stole someone important from her. Before that, Alan stated that there was something he needed to do. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, the dark-skinned girl was entering a place. She remembered what her boss requested. He wanted her to kill someone and bring her head to him. And apparently if she fails, something bad will happen to her. She was dedicated to killing that girl who seemed like it was Liz. She stood up against Liz and wondered why she was there. Before she could do anything, Beatrice hit her and she passed out. Beatrice asked Liz the reason why she came out of her room. She said that she was a decoy or a bait. The girl woke up and tried to stand up, but Beatrice warned her to be quiet and behave. Liz kindly asked her to let them hear her story. They tied her up in a chair, and before they could ask something, Alan appeared with Noel in his back. In the next scene, Alan is in the city grabbing some fruits and vegetables. While he was shopping, he asked the shop owner if there had been lots of people there. The man explained that people were back because the monsters in the forest seemed to have calmed down and the guild was in turmoil because some guy with quite the skills made it happen. When he went back home, he was greeted by the dark-skinned girl and Noel. He told the girl that she should smile while serving customers. Noel was surprised to see him in the shop again. Apparently, when they first got the girl, Noel wanted to take the girl under her care. Beatrice immediately reminded her that she was trying to kill Liz, but Liz also didn't want her to be punished. She tried to come up with the excuses and mentioned that they got some useful information as well. It meant that that old guy was the devil, and it confirmed that the devil was involved in the assassination of the shogun. Noel asked if she was also threatened by the man and if he offered to become his before being on the verge of death. The girl's eyes explained everything and she patted her head saying that she did her best. The girl started to cry her eyes out. That was the story of how she started to work at the workshop. Alan said that it might be fine to visit her even if he doesn't visit daily from now on. He assumed that the devil must have used a gift-like power to form a master-slave relationship with Malene. He forcibly cut it off, but he was still worried whether it would have any side effects on her. He then remembered that he had some things to take care of, so he was about to leave, but Malene stopped and thanked him. Noel also reminded him about the material he gave her, and said that even though it was difficult, she would show him how to use it next time. Meanwhile, in the forest, the devil was still running while thinking about Alan and whether he should report this or not. But his escaping didn't last long as Alan found him. In the next chapter, we see Alan in the crowd and the guild secretary asks his help to take care of the stuff. The reason that they were busy was because of Alan, as she said. But Alan thought all he did was cash in the materials he had on hand and ask for the cleanup of the monsters that he subjugated. However, the girl said that that wouldn't be a problem if the materials were normal. Even the appraisal hadn't caught up to the materials, so they couldn't even cash it in, and it would take around a month to finish it. Alan wondered if he could afford the inn now. Her eyes started to sparkle and she said that she could buy a house. If he does the transaction through the guild, they would automatically just deduct that amount from the cash that they were supposed to give him, and he wouldn't have to worry about having cash in hand for a while. The thought about having his own house sounded nice to him, so he said that he would think about it. Alan then asked if she heard about any interesting stories these days and wanted her to tell him if there was anything that had changed. Since then, there had been no sign of the devil nor the shogun who was investigating Liz and the others. The secretary girl mentioned how the forest had calmed down, and then remembered that there was a rumor going around that someone saw a really famous person who supposedly died a few years ago. She whispered his name to Alan's ears: Alfred Beverstam. Alfred Beverstam was the younger brother of the current king, the one who had the right to succeed to the throne even if he was second in the place. He threw away his right to succeed because he hated the fact that he had to fight his brother for a hit. In terms of ability, he was a person who climbed to the position of deputy chief of the First Knights, and he was Liz's uncle. There were also many rumors concerning dead people resurrecting, but when Alfred perished, it seemed his death was not confirmed with his dead body, so it meant that there was a high chance that he was still alive. Alan then wondered why she was giving that information to him. She just thought it would be useful information for his companion. When he returned home and told them about what he learned, Liz was shocked. Beatrice also stated that the reason that they were here was not just about the shogun from earlier, but she was also worried about Alfred's issue. Liz apologized for not talking about it as it was quite personal. It wasn't the first time they heard about his uncle being spotted, but it spread widely because of something that happened here in the city. Alan asked why they were attacked, and she explained that her uncle was ripped in front of him as his lower body was cut off by monsters. When they were returning from a noble's party, they engaged in combat with a group of monsters, and as soon as her uncle was injured, the ground broke up and he fell into the shore. No matter how hard one could think, the injury was something that no one could survive. But the body was never found. At that time, she wasn't awakened to the power of healing, so she couldn't do anything either. Beatrice added that Liz was in shock at the time when it happened, but she was also trying to recover at the same time, and it was then that they heard about the rumors regarding Alfred being alive. but they presume he was hiding to exact revenge on the royal family for treating him poorly. But that seemed impossible for Alan, as he was a person who abandoned his right to the throne just because he hated fighting. Liz approved and added that he had always been a gentle soul and always greatly cared about her and her father. Now that Alan knew Liz was worried, he wanted to go there and check for themselves. Liz tried to object, but Alan stated that they already know the location of the village. It would take 7 days until they got to that village, as Beatrice said. However, for Alan, it would take a bit longer than she thought. Liz was so glad that Alan came with them and told this to Alan. Alan said that he has been working too much lately, and it cost money to stay at the inn. Liz foresaw that it looked like there would be no monsters during the journey, which was perfect for relaxing. Then they took their way. Liz and Alan were sitting on a huge crag. Liz saw a couple of birds and she said the birds around there seemed friendly, but Alan warned her because they could be dangerous to lean too far. Besides, Beatrice was at the bottom of the crag and asked them how the view was up there and wanted them to be careful. Meanwhile, Liz was calling Beatrice to come up there for a bit and continued the talk about the nice feeling of wind and also saw the beauty of the sky. Liz said that if she hadn't gone on a trip with the two of them, she wouldn't have seen such a nice view, and then turned to Alan and said that she was in his care again. Beatrice, still at the bottom of the crag, yelled that same there as well, by meaning that she agreed with what Liz said. Both girls, Liz and Beatrice, went to a hot spring and talked about how nice it was. Beatrice told Liz it was all thanks to Alan, which Liz agreed with. Then Liz told Beatrice that both she and Alan have been helping her a lot. Beatrice said she and Alan were there of their own volition and told her that she didn't have to worry about it. Liza was wishing that she could be helpful too. When they were in the capital, Liza didn't think that they would ever take a bath like that. The hot spring season ended like that, and they both went to Alan. As soon as Liz saw Alan, told him that the hot spring was very nice, and Alan was glad that she liked it. Dinner was still being prepared, so Liz offered help, but Beatrice didn't want any help. Liz asked her what if she would hurt herself, but Beatrice said that she was not that stupid. Alan told Beatrice that wasn't very convincing, but that was okay for Beatrice. However, Alan didn't want to wait and wanted to prepare dinner together. Both Alan and Liz started to cut the vegetables first. Alan showed Liza how to hold the vegetable that she was going to cut, and she tried to copy it and told her that she shouldn't have worried about it because she would be better at it soon. After they had eaten dinner, Liz fell asleep and Beatrice was carrying her. Beatrice thanked Alan for letting Liz to help them. Alan said that it should be true because she seemed very happy to help with cooking. Alan said that it finally came true, and Beatrice asked what it was. He said that it was the thing that Alan has been longing for, a leisurely and peaceful life. In the next scene, Alan recalls a memory of him. One day when Alan was a child, his brother asked him why their mother was sleeping. He told his brother that was because she was dead, and his brother asked him why she was dead. Alan explained to him that everyone dies someday. His brother seemed very upset. Then they walked to their father. As Alan recalled his memories, tears shed from his eyes. Alan's father was laughing and told that he was a genius as expected of his son. However, their father never told something like that to his little son, Brett. One day, Brett came to Alan and told him that he found a very beautiful stone from the beach. Their father came between them and told Brett that Alan didn't have enough time to be with him and told him that he must have stayed out of Alan's way. His brother immediately apologized, but the father continued his talk and commanded him not to talk with Alan. The last thing the father said to his brother was he was a failure. Brett was in shock, and the beautiful stone that he held dropped on the floor and he ran away. Alan went after him and asked him what was the problem. He asked Alan if he was a failure or a loser. Alan told him that was not true at all. Besides, Alan said to him, deciding a person's value based on someone else's decision was not worth anything at all. Brett started to cry and told him that was a lie because his father told him that. The situation was getting worse. Brett was hearing people talking about him. They said that unlike his brother Alan, all Brett did was play around. On the other hand, for gossipers, Alan was amazing and he was worthy of being the next family head. The next chapter starts with the scene of brothers. Alan held out his hand to his brother and said that it was getting dark and they should have gone. However, the status of Alan, who was called a genius, never changed. Alan told him that he didn't expect for him to level up first. Suddenly, their father expected things from Brett now rather than from Alan. From that day onwards, instead of Brett, his brother Alan was the one who was called a failure. Brett asked him when he was called a failure if he was frustrated. Brett told him that he lost his original status, which may be referring to his status as a loser, and asked him what even was the point of such an absurd number. Brett was very angry while he was talking with Alan. Brett claimed that Alan was also just making a fool out of him and told him that he was just like their father. Alan had always been frivolous, and no matter how many times they called him a failure, he acted like it was nothing. Brett told him that he went through so much and also wanted to show Alan that he was above him, and he would be the next head of the Vestfeld family, not him. Alan was calm and told Brett that it would be fine if he had become the next head, even if he made a mistake, then went to his bedroom. He couldn't sleep because of his anger. The next day was the day of the puppet funeral. Servants came to wake up Alan and make him get ready. Meanwhile, Brett was ready and walking and talking by himself, saying that guy wouldn't be there anymore. Brett wouldn't let anyone look at him with pitiful eyes, which he despised. He repeated himself that he didn't do anything wrong and he was not a loser. He thought that he deserved to be the one to support that household. Alan again told him that even if he made a mistake, he would be there to stop it. Brett went to his father, and the father wanted to start immediately. The Archbishop finally had it, and now it was Brett's time to start their revenge. He said to this country's god and continued. Alan, Liz, and Beatrice arrived in a pretty peaceful village. This village was where Liz's uncle was seen. Alan hoped they found leads about Alfred and the Shogun. A stranger woman came to Alan and asked if they were traveling to that remote place. Alan told her actually they were looking for someone. He said they heard that Liz's uncle, who went missing 5 years ago, was seen in that village. The woman told him that she had lived in that village with some old friends, but she hadn't heard of anything like that, and she recommended him to ask the chief. The woman wanted to show the way to the chief. They went to the chief and he welcomed them, thanked them, and wanted them to relax. They said there was something they wanted to ask the village chief. They mentioned Liz's uncle, and Liz told him that she really wanted to meet and talk with him again. Liz said anything would be fine if he knew anything at all, and she requested him to tell them. She asked if he knew of anyone who had visited the village. However, the chief told them even if he really wanted to help them a lot, he couldn't tell what he didn't know. Beatrice asked the chief if other than Alfred there was any such story of a missing person being found in the village. As they could see, the chief said that the village was fairly secluded, if there was something like that. It was natural for the chief to hear about it. Beatrice decided that then there was nothing more for them to hear. The chief offered them to stay in the village for that day, and he took them to his house. He apologized to them for the trouble. The chief welcomed his house. His house was a little too big for an old man to live in, and in a village like that, there was no place for travelers to stay in. In a few days, the chef said, there would be a small festival enough for the whole village to enjoy, and then invited them to come and see the festival if they wanted. Liz liked that idea and wanted to go. The chief told them it would be nice to make acquaintances with them all. Liz, meanwhile, recalled some memories with her uncle, and once upon a time, she went to the king and asked him if it was true that her father was trying to kill her. She told her uncle that she couldn't understand why on earth he would do such a thing, and wanted him to never leave her alone. Liz decided to see reality with her own eyes, no matter how hard the reality was. She wanted to know the truth. The next chapter started with the day of the festival, which was called the Spirit Festival. It was quite unique for them, and it was a day to welcome the spirits of their ancestors who had died. It was celebrated every year. There was a rumor that the Shogun and Liz's uncle were seen as the deceased. Liz thought maybe they could find out more about it. The festival was very lively, and there was a rule which was not to be gloomy. Everyone was dressed like the deceased. It was because the festival's main purpose was to provide comfort and consolation for the people of the village. Alan asked if there was anything they could do to help, but there was no need to worry because the festival began at nightfall, but they should have enjoyed it. Beatrice found it odd because festivals like these were usually fairly ordinary. Beatrice told them in their country, the dead were treated like some sort of taboo and that you shouldn't have interacted with them thoughtlessly. But that kind of festival was like they were bringing back the dead. It wouldn't be funny if that village got burned down like normally. Alan thought it was because that was a remote village. Beatrice thought since she wasn't on a mission, and since that village wasn't a nuisance to anyone, she would be fine if she left everything the way it should be. Alan was thinking about all of the things that the chief said. There was only that greeting from the chief, and the village people were all dressed up like the deceased. Besides, there was nothing ritualistic about the festival, but Alan thought there was something about it. Meanwhile, someone called them travelers. Come and join us, all of you. Alan would like to stay in his place and rest for a bit. Then someone asked Beatrice by saying, how about you, Lady Knight over there? Would you care for a dance? Alan sent both of them and said that he would be waiting for them. While the girls were going to the dance, someone called her name. Liz! Liz turned back and her eyes brimmed with tears. She couldn't believe what she saw, and she thought that must have been a lie. It was his Uncle Alfred. Uncle Alfred went to a deserted place expecting Liz to follow him, and Liz followed him. He said that he wasn't interested in coming to that place by himself. He asked her if she really needed to be so cautious when she was meeting her father, which he meant she used to call him father. He said he missed her calling him like that, but now he complained about her calling him just uncle. Liz said the father to him with a big smile on her face. He asked if there was something she wanted to ask him. She kind of felt like she was going to get attacked by him. Uncle Alfred told her that at the time, he did his best to tell her the bare minimum. There were a lot of things she wanted to ask. Alfred once told her to be careful about her father because her father was trying to kill her. She asked why her father was trying to kill her. She didn't understand the point of doing something like that. Alfred told her that he was a king, and he knew how to wear a mask when necessary. According to Liz, no king in his right mind would allow a princess to come to a remote place like that, and she thought you should have had at least a platoon of knights ensuring your safety. and by the time you got there, someone attempted to kill you. Alfred revealed why he wanted to kill Liz. The king wanted 5 people dead, including her. It meant that the lives of the possessor of the congenital gifts, which means a trait or abnormality present from birth, were in danger, as Alfred said. He guessed the shogun who was killed first was one of those gifted individuals, just like Liz. He asked when they were in the royal capital investigating the shogun if there had been anyone watching her lately. She approved that she was watched. However, she said she wasn't the only one with a congenital gift, and things had been strange lately, as if someone was watching her. Alfred got angry and asked her why she didn't say anything. She thought it all fitted together. She couldn't believe her father would try to kill her, but she could still believe it. She asked, however, why those with the congenital gifts had to die. Alfred said the puppet of God. Liz didn't understand. Alfred told her that was what they called her. He explained a gift was something given to her by God, and in it was a little of God's will. Even dragons can be killed, and extraordinary weapons could be made which would bring victory. And he turned to Liz and told her that she was a saint. As Alfred said, she was one of the revelations of God and miraculous beings who could do what mankind could not. Her power was as mighty as God intended it to be. Her gifts had too much influence on those around her. If she wanted to, she could even control the whole country and even destroy it. Whether she would do that or not was still possible for Alfred. The mere existence of her, the possessors of the congenital gifts, was a threat, as Alfred said. Alfred continued his talk with Liz. He said her power was subjected to divine will to determine its use. That was true that Liz got a revelation and she was driven by divine will, but it was to prevent people's misery. She asked if her power spared people from unhappiness, then what was wrong with that? Alfred said that was right and told her the world was meant for the people, and that was why they should be the ones making their own happiness, not the gods. It was her father who decided to kill her gift-bearers to return the world back into the hands of mankind. He said that he didn't want her to die like that, so he had a proposal. He offered to defeat that man together. Liz apologized and told him that even if that was true, she believed that they would come to an understanding if they just talked that out. Alfred told her kindness of hers would destroy her and grieve those who care about her. He wanted Liz to understand him. Liz told Alfred it was her uncle who once taught her that the most important thing to do was to believe in people at all times. He said that was right, but his voice changed. Liz started to get scared and her voice was trilling. He said no need to worry. At that time, Liz couldn't believe that person was Uncle Alfred and questioned who that person was. He said he would be putting that body of hers to good use. He said, "Liz, be at ease and die." Alfred was about to kill Liz, but Alan caught up and stopped his sword with his own. Alfred called Alan a brat and got angry for interfering with his job. Alan told him he was the one who interrupted his peace. Meanwhile, Liz was very scared and asked Alan why he was there, and he said he had been keeping watch on her. Alfred monkeyed around with Alan because he was Liz's ex-fiancée, which he later called the failure. Alan told him he was not going to be talking to someone who was not following their own will, and Alan was ready to fight. He was using the authority of the blade, World's End, and he broke the spell that was controlling Alfred. Liz was shocked since Alfred was already dead. However, Alan told Liz he wasn't the one controlling his body. It was the first time that Alan used that power, so he wasn't sure if it worked. Alfred regained his consciousness and came to life. Then he realized he could move. He told Alan that he had broken the spell controlling his body. He immediately apologized to Liz and he said he never intended to kill her. He added that it wasn't the king who was trying to kill her. However, he said, it was true that he had a grudge against the royal family. He admitted that he had been betraying the royal family while working with them even before they killed him to get revenge on the royal family. From now on, Alfred was certain the sorcerer knew the spell that controlled him had been lifted. Therefore, they didn't have much time. He turned to Alan and told him there were 2 things he needed him to do for him. Alan was willing to do what he said. Alfred asked him to take good care of Liz. He said she was a good girl, but he was worried because she was a little reckless. Alan would have done it even if Alfred hadn't told him to do so. He thanked Alan, and the second thing he wanted was to have a spar with him. Alan didn't mind. Liz asked Alan why he wasn't surprised at all, but he was kind of expecting it because Alfred was leaving her precious daughter in his hands after all. Alan thought it was only fair that Alfred made sure that Alan was deserving of it. Alfred told him that he was an intelligent man. After a little talk, Alan and Alfred were about to start their spar. Alfred said, "Not as a corpse, but as a knight. Here I come." Alan told Alfred that he wasn't really comfortable with fighting someone who just woke up, but Alfred was full of confidence and he said he was pretty strong indeed. Liz was looking at them with her watery eyes. Alan promised Alfred that he would protect Liz from the scary demons till there was someone stronger than him. Alan said as that night was a spirit festival, a one-night-only dream when the living and the dead mingle, it was time to dance with the dead. Alan cut Uncle Alfred's tummy with no hesitation by using extreme flash skills. While he was dying, he apologized for leaving Liz with tears in her eyes, but that was a relief for him. Finally, he could rest in peace as a knight and as a man. His last words of his were for Liz. He said he had never had a child, but Liz was like a daughter to him when she called him father. He said he couldn't describe how hard it was to keep that joy off his face. He told Liz that he loved her and hoped she would find happiness. Meanwhile, Liz burst into tears. When all the flames burn out together, the festival ends. The dead go back underworld and the living go back to their daily lives. The chief came to Alan and would like to ask something. He asked him when he had noticed it. Alan had known since the beginning that there were dead people in this village and that the village chief controls those corpses. As the chief said, they called it a necromancer, and asked him if he already knew that much, why would he do nothing? Alan answered that he didn't want to get involved since he wasn't sure if they would try to harm him even though the dead lived alongside the living. That village was peaceful even if the chief was a demon. Alan asked if it was way too narrow-minded to assume all demons were bad. Well, now that he was thinking about it, Alan said he really would be a useful pawn, so he asked him if he was hiding the dead underground. The chief said he had gotten a lot of versatility, and Alan seemed to be quite capable, but those things that came from underground could still move even if their heads were off. They couldn't even feel pain and would just keep coming at Alan. He asked Alan now how long he could last before his power. Alan used his various skills on him over and over as an answer. The chief was in pieces when he finished. Alan was in a very bad mood as he had a strict rule that a person's body and soul were not for someone else to mess with. In the next scene, Beatrice states that she heard about what happened last night, which made Alan wonder if he was going to give a speech. As he was expecting, she scolded him pretty hard. Liz was on the other hand blaming herself for everything that happened. She thinks that she was too careless and got carried away by the village's peaceful atmosphere. But Alan didn't really mind that at all because he was thinking about the stone that the village chief was holding. It looked like an oar, but when he saw it closely he realized that it wasn't. But as he thought about it, he started to get the bigger picture. Liz decided to get a transmission, but it seemed like something was wrong. When they asked, she said that the shogun was in the royal capital. In the kingdom of Adastera, royal capital Cardia, people were already talking about the shogun, and the man who had loyally served the king for many years, Edward, appeared. Edward also noticed the rumors, and the man he was talking to said that it was actually worse than ever. But it was understandable to some extent. He wondered if someone was spreading the rumors or if they should just assume that it was an organization. He also wondered about Shogun. The man explained that his subordinates were searching for him and a lot of people had seen him, so it was best to assume it was true than to think they had fooled them. However, for Edward, the Shogun was already dead. He knew all about how he felt about this country, and he wasn't the type to spread a rumor like that, so it was safe to assume he was fake. But his second-in-command objected that it would be better to be prepared for anything, which made him giggle. Edward said that in any case, except facing the crisis that was threatening the fate of the nation, there was nothing for him to do. His companion agreed as he said that the shogun's gift was the ability to force orders upon his subordinates, regardless of their own will. If the shogun betrays them, the enemy's small army suddenly becomes first-class soldiers, so Edward would be the one in the royal capital who could stand up to him. No matter what the truth was, Edward was determined to stop him from taking revenge on the kingdom. Additionally, he considered this as an opportunity to decide the strongest in the kingdom as he had never fought with a serious opponent before. Commander Edward's gift was an absolute disaster, as the man next to him thought. He was sure that Shogun had no chance against him no matter which gift he had. But he did feel uneasy. One of the soldiers came and informed Edward that a message from the guards came and they said that a suspicious person was seen. Edward inquired to know his location, but that wasn't the case. They went inside the castle, which was unexpected, and encountered a man who had his hoodie on. The fact that Edward had been brought here must mean that the man was a difficult person to bring to the garrison. The man confirmed him, saying that if he had been taken in without question, there would have been a lot of trouble, which was why they had to meet in a place like this. The moment they heard his voice, they were already shocked, because it was indeed the archbishop who was talking to them. They found him quite scary, but Edward was angry and he asked why they called him there. They said that the Lord had something to say to them. Edward told the others to go back to their place, but they wanted to accompany him even though they did not know the details. He said that they weren't going there to wage another fight and their main goal was to gather information. The man who wore glass tried to object, but it was pointless. In the castle, Lord Brett was informed that Edward was being fished out by the archbishop. Even Lord Brett used the archbishop for this, so he would be in trouble if it didn't work. Edward was pretty unreasonable at times. General Cyril's gift was generally good, but Edward wasn't an enemy here. He could deactivate the gifts of all people who were in a 1-meter radius instantly, even all the indirect attacks such as arrow and slash attacks. In other words, Edward was almost invincible on the battlefield. If it was up to them, he couldn't help it, but he was sure he would be able to do something about it. But the thing was, he was too hasty. And if something were to happen unexpectedly, it could all just fall apart. Someone came and informed Lord Brett that the person who arrived was the hero, A short-haired girl was with a little girl in the town, wondering if they had come at the wrong time, as it was quite lively there. She told the girl to not get lost in the crowd, but the girl didn't want to leave her as she knew she would get lost. She promised the girl that she would help her find a place to stay until she calmed down. They walked around for a while, and it seemed like they were near. Suddenly, a bunch of hoodied men surrounded them and asked how long she was planning to hide. She said that they didn't notice that their killing intent was leaking, but if her killing intent was the same as theirs, she wondered if they would be able to kill her. It seemed like they already knew they couldn't beat her, but it would be a different story if she weren't alone. She thought they were going to attack the little one, but it seemed like she was misunderstanding something. The girl started to moan in pain, and the man explained that she had already been engraved by their technique. Their technique was using her life as a fuel to self-distract. The girl hugged the child, and when the man flipped his finger. In the next scene, Edward heard an explosion, but he seemed comfortable as her men would be on their way if something happens. They arrived at the place where the Archbishop's job was done, which was a training ground. Edward wondered who would be in a place like this, but he was going to find out soon. The Archbishop left there with the questions in his head. While he was wondering who would call him here, a man came and made a sudden attack that he could barely defend himself. He seemed like he knew him and stated that he was the same as ever. Craig was the only person he knew who would try to arrange a duel without giving his greetings. He asked what was the meaning of this and found his actions pretty foolish. But Craig said that it was too late and the Archbishop was on their side now. Edward was taken aback and asked what he was talking about. Without answering him, Craig again attacked him, saying that he was the one who called him there and he was aiming to get rid of him. In the castle there was a noise and people were talking about the Archbishop. General Cyril arrived, which shocked everyone because people thought he was dead. He smiled and apologized to everyone for startling them. But there was a reason for their sudden appearance this time, and it was the fact that the country was deceiving them. Then he corrected himself, saying that God was deceiving them. There was a reason he hadn't talked about this. They were talking about God, and since they were involved in this matter, it would be out of his league if he were to interfere. He had no idea what would happen to the people who lived here if he were to speak out on this subject. Besides, he felt guilty and didn't intend to get away with it. General Cyril shared the same feelings with the Archbishop. He knew it would be something incredibly cruel to hear, so he couldn't shout it out. The more they talked, the more people got confused. General continued, mentioning that he wasn't forced to say this. The news was the country and God were fooling them through the gifts. The gifts were what God used to control them. Meanwhile, on the training ground, Edward was being defeated by Craig. He couldn't understand why he was so strong because all the powers of his gift should be nullified. He then realized that it was his level. Apparently, it was the level that counted. The higher his level is, the higher should be ranked. In other words, he became a higher being, becoming closer to God. It wouldn't be good if his country or the rules were to know what levels could primarily become. As he said, levels hold the power to kill the god. Edward thought he was out of his mind, but he just wanted them gone. It was faulty, it took advantage of people, and it only shackles them. That was the real explanation about the gifts. Apparently, Craig had lost someone that he loved, and ever since that, he wanted God to die. But he didn't think God killed her. She was a weak figure, but she was given the gift of the Virgin Mother, which was to bring forth heroes. This was Edward's last straw, and he told him the fact that he took her as his wife because of that gift, even though he knew it all along. He didn't want a child. He was fine with her being there. She needed to use her gift and birth a child, but in the end, she died. This was the reason why he thought gifts were just toys with human life. On the other hand, the general was explaining the same thing to the people, and the Archbishop confirmed him. He said that everyone was already a slave to God, but even so, he encouraged them to open their eyes to the truth. The general told people to make a decision not only for themselves, but also for their children and descendants to come in the future, but warned them to keep in mind that gifts had power and that some people would accept gifts even if they don't. The Archbishop promised to answer their questions and welcomed the Brett Vestfeld. The people seemed surprised that Brett was there and wondered about Alan. Brett didn't wait any longer to introduce himself and the alchemist whom they had employed in their household. Originally, his skills were not very good, but he had reached the point of creating magical life forms. A silhouette appeared behind him, and he said that it was the magical life form he created. It was kind of a golem. He ensured them that the golem was safe as they were the ones who created it. It was an entity that could assist them with its powers. Furthermore, its power was on par with the soldiers of the Knight Order. It was a verified fact that he had confirmed. It was possible to use it as a defense force for the country. During that time, there would be no attacks from other nations. People believed him as he was the general, but still wondered how a mediocre alchemist created something like that. He said that it was his power, the Anthem of Heroes. The Anthem of Heroes had the power to draw out the latent abilities of the target. Of course, it was not possible to draw out everything at once, and it required time. But when they use it, the person who used can have much longer abilities, like drawing out his abilities as an alchemist. and the power that was drawn out was ultimately the power that the person originally possessed. By doing so, what was passed down through generations could eventually bestow true power upon their descendants, surpassing even gifts and the like. Since it was different from gifts, it was possible to pass it on to the next generations. People seemed convinced, but still wondered what would happen after Lord Brett passed. He brought a demon inside and stated that they existed for that purpose. Before everyone freaks out, he says that they have successfully established a cooperative relationship with the demons. The bishop stated that it was thanks to their cooperation. They revealed all the truths that the country had been hiding and promised to assist them. They thought they didn't need gifts and had no problems. At the same time, the first knights were informing the glassed man that the vice captain didn't seem to look so well, but he was sure the captain would be fine and decided to wait for now. While they were talking, he noticed that there was a man behind them and asked who he was. In the meantime, he knew they couldn't handle him. The man told him that he wasn't an enemy, and he needed to hear his story. He explained everything, but he obviously didn't believe him and told him to stop saying nonsense. It wasn't so surprising, but he still warned him that in reality, his future should definitely be changed by the gifts he has been given. If the gift given to them was different, there may be those who were disappointed because they didn't receive the desired gift during the blessing ceremony. Indeed, even with an elite group of knights, the guys were different and might not have joined the Knight Order by now. He wanted to become a baker or a merchant and explore different lands, but being a knight was his pride. The man told him that the real question was if they could beat them, because even the gods themselves decided their fate without their consent. He said that they were chosen to be here, which made him laugh. His role was to stop him, but he decided to kill him as cleanly as possible to teach him the greatness of their kind through their lifeless bodies. After implying that he was a fool, he disappeared and appeared again in front of him. He couldn't even see him before he got injured. He tried to not lose any focus, but it was hard with those wounds he had. Suddenly a woman's voice echoed, saying that if knights were fools, it would be a true statement. It was Beatrice who came to rescue them. The man with glasses mentions that it had been a while since he last saw Beatrice and she was looking fine. He told her that he felt ashamed. Beatrice told him thanks to the vice captain's magical tool, they made it in time and that it was a good decision, and asked him how he got there. Suddenly, the dark-skinned girl came out from nowhere. Beatrice asked her how she got there. Since she had strong allies with that kind of power, she borrowed some of their abilities, and she told Beatrice that she wouldn't let her escape. They fought and Beatrice destroyed her. After she destroyed her, the man with glasses told Beatrice that her power was so incredible and told her that he had a lot of things to ask. Meanwhile, Edward was injured and Craig brought Edward to his knees. Then he told Edward that he could clearly see the difference in power. It would have been better to obediently submit, as Craig said. It would be disgraceful for Edward, so he told Craig that he was hiding something. Edward told him if what he had said was true, then the gifted with high abilities would become a hindrance. Then he added that actually they would be eliminated. Craig's mind was as sharp as ever, as Edward said, but he wished that it were a bit duller, then he might not have had to face the possibility of death. Edward asked Craig what happened to General Cyril and asked her what he did to the Archbishop. Craig found the question pointless because he thought Edward already had the answer within himself. Then Edward decided to stop him. In place of the friend they lost, Cyril, and above all, as his friend because he found it nonsense. Someone called out to them, and when they looked at her, they saw that she was Akira. She told Edward that he sure got taken down spectacularly, and she asked Craig to stay where he was. She intended to defeat the old man herself. Craig was in shock and asked her how she was there because she should have been dead. She told him that he didn't go killing her off, although earlier she thought she was dead for sure too. She wondered how much he knew about that time. Craig asked Akira if she abandoned the child and saved herself. In the end, even if people called her braver, she was still God's puppet for Craig. Akira told him not to jump to conclusions. She told him if he knew that, then that meant he was one of them, and asked him if it was. Craig, with an annoying smile on his face, asked her what she was going to do about that. Akira told him that she was going to crush him. Edward sarcastically apologized for interruption and told Craig that he was already a sight to behold, so if he would be willing to help, he would be grateful. Craig said that was fine. Akira just saved him some time and effort because now he could kill God's puppet with his own hands. Akira said the constant talk about puppets was getting annoying and asked who he was calling a puppet. She told him that power may have been given to her, but still she was her. She told him that if he was complaining about that, then God or no God, she would knock him down. Edward knew that that was right. Whether God willed it or not, it was up to her to decide what to do. Blaming everything on God was not the answer. It was just an excuse. Edward told Craig if he couldn't stop him, then he would have to kill Craig to prove that he was right. Craig told him to show himself what he had gotten. The next chapter started with an argument between Alan and his brother Brett, and we took a short break for the others to fight. Brett, who was a failure for everyone except for his brother Alan, said that with the power they possessed, they could draw out the power within all of them. He asked them to leave the national defense to them. He said they were working tirelessly for many years. Alan asked him if it was so. Alan thought it was still impossible to believe and told him for a long time not to see failure. Brett asked Alan why he was there and what exactly he meant by saying he can't believe in them. Alan asked him, as of now, if he was the only person who could create those magical life forms. Brett said the production methods were top secret and they didn't want other countries to imitate them. Alan told him again that then he wouldn't believe it anymore because that demon tried to assassinate the princess. The others in the back were shocked and asked each other if he meant Liz by saying princess. Brett asked him what good it would do for them to do such a thing. Brett said he would appreciate it if Alan refrained from talking nonsense. Liz suddenly appeared in the middle of the folk and commanded them to stop. People were excited to see Liz, and while the general and the archbishop were plotting assassination, they asked if it was considered a rebellion. They wondered why against Liz specifically rather than against the kingdom. Liz said that is because she was a congenital gift holder and that is for demons, powerful gift holders were considered obstacles. Liz said that the one who attacked her was the magical life form standing there and pointed to Brett and he started to laugh. Brett told them even though he was trying to settle things peacefully, she had to go and cause unnecessary trouble. The folk questioned him for what he was saying and understood nothing and wanted the knights to fight for them, but it seemed that the knights were under control. A knight was about to kill a boy, but Alan immediately intervened. After his intervention, all of the knights had fallen. Liz didn't understand what was going on, so he asked Alan. He said he cut the strings that were controlling the knights and it seemed like they were under control for a long time, so he hoped there were no lasting effects or after effects. It seems like 2 of the knights were forcibly moving corpses. Brett flared out and asked Alan what he did and called him failure. Brett yelled at him not to get in his way. Liz commanded everyone to evacuate. Alan was thinking what a troublesome brother he had. He thought he didn't give him any attention and it might have been his fault. However, even so, he said, if by any chance Brett made a mistake when that time came and he punched him in the face. Brett was on the floor. Meanwhile, Liz was trying to calm everybody down. She turned to Alan and told him that she would take care of it from now on. Alan told her that then he would leave it up to her and realized she looked so worried. He made a speech and told her that she didn't have to look so worried. However, Liz said that she would be fine. We turned back to the fight between Edward, Akira, and Craig. Edward, Akira, and Craig were fighting and Edward told Akira that the old man, Craig, was strong as hell. Akira found his movements were kind of weird because he could clearly predict their movements. Edward told Akira that his gift was the future vision, which means he could see the future. However, as Edward said, that gift took a lot of concentration, so it couldn't be used for battle. Edward told Craig that even that girl didn't want that kind of power. But Craig said he always saw her death many times. He said that the future could change if you try to avoid it, but whatever he did, it was only her death that he couldn't change. In the end, he couldn't do anything. He said he was in despair many times and asked who the hell decided her death. Her life was taken because of the gift. It was because of the god's plan called fate. Edward said the god's existence was just a shackle for humans. Akira now understood the reason why Craig denied God and the gift that was his power. Craig said the loss of the most important person to you was something you couldn't forgive yourself for. Akira told him to stop saying unnecessary things. He thought Akira was right and maybe he was just overthinking, then he decided to kill them. He wanted to get strength in exchange for his life and commanded to burn it all. The powers of Akira and Craig were countering each other. Craig told Akira that he would crush her right arm. Edward took Akira and hugged him. He was wondering if it was a devil's power. He commanded Craig to stop and told him if he used that power much more he would lose himself. Craig was annoyed and suddenly attacked Edward. Craig was being swallowed by darkness, anger, grief, and sorrow. Edward was about to die and he was crying. Craig thought it must have been painful, so he killed Edward. The last thing Edward said was to stop messing around, and until the end, the old man was fighting for him. Then Craig began to have an internal conflict. He felt like no one understood him. Akira was looking at him and sarcastically called him a hero. Craig said her next was her turn to die. Akira was anxious that Craig was about to kill her and she could not prevent it. All she could say was, "Damn it." However, suddenly Alan showed up and apologized to Akira for being late. Craig was laughing and said he never thought it would go that far. He said he didn't know that Alan was the one standing in his way. Alan said he was right and if he could, he would like someone to take his place. Craig said if Alan thought so, he should have left that place immediately. Craig said why and how he was there didn't matter anyway and commanded him to get lost. There was no way Alan could do that. Craig said to think that he was the son of someone who said such cruel things. The apple didn't fall from the tree, so Craig thought it couldn't be helped. He didn't expect the darkness born from his hatred to be dispelled so easily. Craig asked Alan if he knew what on earth he was. Alan said, "A failure." Craig said so he did understand. However, Alan said that even if he was a failure, there were people that he couldn't leave alone, and told Craig that he didn't feel sorry about his mother. Craig got angry and commanded him not to dare to talk about his mother. Akira thought it was the devil's power. At that rate, Craig wouldn't be able to turn back to normal. It was his own body, so Akira thought it was okay to do as he pleased. While Alan was saying at least until he realizes the gravity of what he's done, Craig moved and he lost his consciousness for a while. He felt like he had been submerged in ice, bottomless despair. He saw some things like dreams or events from the past that conjured up a mental picture of a lady lying on her bed motionless. Alan was crying and saying that he didn't know. Then he saw the same woman with a baby in her arms while he was standing next to her. He thought that maybe he just hadn't wanted to know. Alan thought that building relations with people only to construct barriers, birth sorrow. They changed their mind all too quickly. He knew it all too well, but the people that believed in him were still in that world. If so, then he thought he could not stop there. He immediately came to his senses. Liz was telling me everything about Akira. Later records stated that it was a very hectic day. In the capital, a demon general and an archbishop made their appearance, and a major incident involving the death of the leader of the Second Knight's Order occurred. However, the princess managed to rally the people and prevent complete chaos. Thereafter, the Duchy of Westfield found itself in great turmoil. The head of the family teamed up with the devil to rebel against the nation. Despite their significant efforts, it was inevitable that some would be left behind. Then, people's everyday lives turned to normal. Many lives were lost and it left behind many scars of sorrows, but their lives needed to move forward. Alan was kneeling in front of the king. He appreciated his great contributions. He hereby bestowed upon him the title of Duke Westfield. He respected and fully declined as he had already been disowned. Alan said it would be an outrageous act to give away not only the title of a duke but also one of the most important lands of this country. It is for the sake of this country that he should have not accepted the offer, and therefore he declined, and then asked the king if it was all right. King said he wouldn't mind, and told him that he was expecting it because he had heard a lot about him. This was the utmost respect that he could give him because he protected that country and his most precious treasure. Then, he commanded his servant to call Liz. A girl came and told Alan that she wasn't waiting for him, but he really came. Alan told her that he already declined the proposal from the king. She told him to forget about it and asked him if he was going to go back to that town. After all, it was convenient there and easy to collect information from surrounding villages. She asked what he was going to do after that. Alan didn't know the answer and told her that he had to wait and see until the time came because things were still as lax as ever. Alan was about to leave and he thanked the dark-skinned girl and her for coming together that time because it helped a lot. They said that it was nothing and didn't do anything in particular. Alan turned to the girl and asked her if she had something to say to Liz about things, but he was thinking that she was busy with various things right now. Meanwhile, Liz was running to them. She seemed happy and excited to find them. She was afraid that they already left the town. Alan asked her if it was okay for her to come there. Liz said to Alan she wanted to take her with them. Alan told her that she had already done her duty. She said that she had changed her name a little. Her name was Liz Westfield from now on. Alan wondered if Liz had taken over the Westfield territories. Liz said that was right. Alan was only a lord in name, and he said that he was planning to give the real power to someone else. He asked Liz if there was anything in for her. She said even if she said so herself, she wasn't suitable to be a princess in the first place. There were many things she needed to learn, as she said, but it was difficult to move freely if she was not in that position. Alan said that he had no choice but to agree. Alan asked Liz where Beatrice was. She said Beatrice was originally a royal guard under the control of the royal family, because Liz was no longer a member of the royal family. Alan asked her if it was alright for her to be alone. Liz wouldn't mind that. She said several people from the royal capital were scheduled to come to the territory, but she thought she would go a step ahead. Liz said as long as she was with Alan, she felt like everything was going to be alright. She said even though she was nobody, and even though she was not a hero in this world, there were still people who needed her. Alan thought even if he was a failure. They called Alan and they left the king's place. That is the end of the recap for now. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.